Greetings. I wanted to come on today and talk to you about something that I think that everybody's dealing with in their own way, in one form or another, right now. Right now, as I'm filming this, it is Thanksgiving, just a few days past Thanksgiving, and I think a lot of us, particularly a lot of us who have been caught up in whatever part of our lives, my past life especially, when I was raising my family, and even when I was growing up as a young girl, we were always caught up in this idea that once, school starts in September, we would go to school in September. October, we would start to get ready for Halloween. We'd have Halloween, and then we had to get rid of Halloween, and then it was going to be Thanksgiving. And then as soon as Thanksgiving was gone, boom, we'd be getting ready, starting to make our Christmas prep, getting ready for Christmas coming at the end of what we call the holiday season into the New Year's. Of course, now my life is a little even maybe busier than it was when my kids were small, because now we kind of have, if we want to call it an added layer, put in another complication in there, is now we celebrate Yule as well as Christmas. We don't, not just privately, which wouldn't be as big a deal, but we celebrate Yule with a group of people. So we have obligations, both family obligations with a Christmas obligations, as they've been in the past, and then we have Yule obligations, which come this year, which come a little before then. So we tend to have to really be ready for that holiday time a little bit earlier than we used to have to do. And anyway, it's harder and harder. I think most people are getting very stressed in recent years because as the holidays became more and more commercialized, places that provided us with what we needed to help decorate our homes or whatever for the holidays, it rushed us. They wanted to rush us. We started to have to, if you try to buy something at Christmas time, I'm thinking particularly about trees. I know in a lot of people's tradition, Christmas Eve is when they put up their Christmas tree. We always did ours sooner. We never did it in time for Thanksgiving, which a lot of people also do before Thanksgiving. But a lot of people, their tradition was to get up and put up a tree on Christmas Eve. And I was realizing, I think last year was the first year, perhaps the year before, there were the lots around here that sold Christmas trees were closed before Christmas Eve even happened. They were sold out of trees before there was. So if you were somebody who had the tradition of putting up a Christmas tree on Christmas Eve, you're out of luck. I thought, oh my, that's really ridiculous. That's ridiculous. I mean, it just is. It's bad enough that you have to shop for Christmas earlier and earlier, or Halloween. If you try to buy anything to decorate for Halloween, or in my case for Samhain, in October, you're pretty well screwed. Because they don't have them in the stores anymore. You have to go earlier and earlier and earlier. It's very stressful. It's very stressful. Well, I'm not here to talk to you about decorating. As you can see, maybe you can see behind me, I still have some things left out that had to do with Thanksgiving in my family celebration, but I am very, very busy. I haven't thought about where I'm going to put I'm starting to think about where I'm going to put a tree this year for Yule and Christmas, because unlike last year, this year we will have both celebrations. We'll have a group celebration for Yule, and we'll have a group celebration, a family celebration for Christmas. So we will be inviting people into the home, unlike last year. So we're excited about that. So I am starting to think about those things a little bit. But basically, that's really not my subject matter for today, actually. What I want to talk to you about today is some things I am doing ending the harvest. We have talked about, I'm always talking about the wheel of the year, and I'm talking about how we had the initial harvest coming with llamas. It's actually technically the first llamas on the wheel, and then Samhain being, we have Mabon, and then we have Samhain being the final harvest. And we should think, well, logically, that was the final harvest, and we're done with it. Well, that's not necessarily the case. And I learned that real fast here as a gardener in California, in Southern California. Because while I do realize that I know people that are in perhaps Idaho or maybe in other states where they're well past the gardening season, because I watched some of the channels that I watch on YouTube where they have talked to people with very large gardens that are homesteaders with very large families and try to provide themselves with most of their own food supply, that they're rushing, the whole family is rushing out sometimes at the beginning of September to bring in as much as they can rescue from their gardens because a hard freeze is coming. Well, so, and I realize there's a lot of damage done from a hard freeze. So those people, they have, the gardening season, and then they do have that winter, that set in of the harsh, cold temperatures, which will pretty much knock your garden out, a lot of your garden anyway. Here in California, we don't do that. But I've talked in the past about how seasons come to us here. And when I first moved here, I did miss the rush of, all at once it was fall, all at once it was spring, those feelings, or here comes the first snowfall of winter. I remember my first, being pregnant with my first child and going into labor, and it was premature labor, it was early labor. Our doctor was not in town. It was a small town, there was nobody really around to help me much. The hospital was an old Victorian mansion which had been converted into a hospital. That was our local hospital. And I was in there, they're trying to hold off the labor as long as they could to get a doctor for me. And of course there was concern because she was early, etc. And I was very young at the time. I was a very young woman, just having turned 21. And but I remember my room was the front of the building room, and it was just the wall. It was a big, giant, very, very large picture window, looking out into the street there in town, and the little small garden in front, and being in bed and being in labor and being nervous and etc. And it was early November. And it started snowing. It was the first snow of the winter, early November. And of course I wasn't worrying about gardens, anything at that time, but how peaceful it was, and just watching that snowfall and that first whisper of winter coming, the tiny little flakes that get bigger and bigger and fell heavier and heavier onto the ground. And it was so calming to me. It helped me remain calm during that rather traumatic time. When we come here to California, I missed those kind of things. I didn't have that. Those really strong signs of the seasons changing. We knew what to expect at certain times. During the apple harvest, we knew to expect the farmers' trucks along the road that would sell their cider, the jugs of cider, or in corn harvest, we would see the corn and the tractor beds laying on the side of the roads, or these kind of things happened all the time, pretty much like clockwork. Here in California, for me, it's still there. I'm looking for these signs, and they're still there, but they come quietly. I say they come quietly. They come quietly, and they force me to stop and pause and listen and appreciate the season. But I've also learned, that has helped me learn a bigger truth about the wheel of the year and the changing seasons, in that they don't just happen. It's not like a freeze is coming tonight, winter's coming, we got to get the tomatoes off the vines. That's not what happens here. It's a very gradual ending, slowing down, and a gradual change. Hello, darling. Hello. Somebody come to see us. Hello, baby. This is Fezziwig behind me. Be a gentleman, Fezzy. Be a gentleman. He's happy. He's always happy to see me. A little too happy today to see me. Okay, Fez. Fez. Okay. Lay down. Lay down. Now. Psst. Psst. Just lay down. That's a boy. That's a boy. Good boy. I had to come there and get Fezwig off my head. This is Fezwig. Say hello, Busy. Say hello, Busy. Say hello. He's one of my twins. He has a twin brother named Twidget. Okay, so anyway, I've been saying the seasons come gentler here. They come, but they're much more gradual, and there's not a line between harvest, Yule, between, here, okay, get down, good. There you go, good boy. Since we don't have a strong, very evident change between the seasons, between the Sabbats, between, like, for instance, Samhain and Yule, we don't, when does one end and one start? They overlap a little bit. And that's what's been happening in my life. This overlap has been happening. Earlier in the year, when my tomatoes were still really coming in pretty profusely, I was getting a lot of other harvests from a lot of other things, and I was putting them in my freezer. I wanted to hold them off until I was ready to deal with them. And I'm going to show you, I have a little clip that I'm going to put in here and show you what I'm going to do with those tomatoes. I hope you can see this. Having a little trouble getting the camera to pick it up because it's so bright. There's so much sun coming through the window. But here is a this stack of bags of tomatoes was taken directly from my freezer, and there's a basket with still in and everything. And I just wanted to show you what I have in here. It's a big variety, representing all of the just bits I've taken from the garden and tomatoes as they were ripening, and I did not have time to deal with them. This is a good trick for when you're overwhelmed with other things and the tomatoes have to be picked. It's also a good trick, which I use sometimes for if I want to collect a lot of tomatoes and they're coming in slowly. I don't have enough for a big recipe. I will just freeze them as I get them, and then I will process them later. And that's what this represents. I have some that, as you can see, this bag is from this year. Here's big heirlooms, some green zebras, and some little plum varieties, some paste tomatoes. It's a big assortment. And as a matter of fact, some of these, I'm not sure if any are here, but I had some that were left over from last year. So I have a combination. Anyway, this is taking up way too much room in my freezer, and I wanted to make room in my freezer for a turkey, to be honest, another turkey. So take advantage of the good pricing right now, this time of the year. So the tomatoes had to go. So I'm going to let them thaw here in the sink, and then I'll show you what I'm going to be doing with them. I just have a kind of a stock pot here, and I have dumped some of my tomatoes are thawed. Some of the tomatoes are thawed, and some are still a little bit frozen. I've taken most of the skins. Here I have some scarring here on this one. I have it on top here. When it thaws a little more, I can slip that skin off. But as you can see, most of these smaller tomatoes, I have just left the skin on. The bottom of this crock pot is mostly the pulp from the tomatoes that have thawed and then have been skinned. But the small tomatoes, I'm leaving whole. I'm going to leave them whole. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that later. Okay, here my tomatoes are on the pot. Last you saw, they were pretty, they just looked like tomatoes. And now we have a kind of a mess. It's kind of but it's a much thicker. And as you can see, there are pieces of skin on some of the smaller tomatoes that have come off. Kind of looks gross. But other things that you're seeing are, I've added some things. And in the rush of trying to deal with these tomatoes, I forgot to shoot any film on it, but I can tell you what I did. It was relatively easy. Is after the tomatoes, I cooked the tomatoes down a bit. Then I took, I had basically some leftover peppers, leftover celery from a relish tray that we had on Thanksgiving, and I chopped those up, and I cut up some onion and put it all and cooked it down in a little bit of olive oil. I think I had a little butter in there for flavor too, in a skillet just to get them a little bit soft. And then I added them to the pot, kept it going. And what had happened, all those tomatoes as they cooked released a lot of water. And now a lot of people will drain that water off, or they will cook and cook and cook to cook it down so that it gets really, really thick. But what I did instead, I still wanted to keep the soup vegetarian, so I didn't want to add chicken broth to my tomatoes anyway. So what I did was, I took a can of tomato paste, just a small, I don't know what that small size is, maybe is it 4 ounces, something like that. And I stirred that in, and it helped to thicken the tomato water, the juices from those tomatoes, that instead of cooking them down, it just made it a nice, lovely soup consistency, but it maintained the flavor. You know, there's a lot of water in that. So that's what I did. And now I have this mess. Doesn't look that appetizing. But I've done that. I have, I did add a little bit of chili flakes, because I like a little bit of heat in the soup. So I have the cooked down the tomatoes cooked down, the puree made out of the tomato paste and the water. Cooked peppers I have cooked. I think I have some red pepper, some orange pepper. I had some onion. I had a little bit of red onion I put in here. And I had hot chili flakes. Oh, and garlic. And I put in some garlic. I put about probably 4 or 5 cloves of garlic in here. And then I did add, after it all cooked down, just at the very end of cooking, I added some fresh thyme from my garden and probably about 4 cups of fresh basil from the garden. And just cooked that just to wilt those herbs down a little bit. And now I'm ready to take this gloppy mess and I'm going to transfer it into my super duper blender, and I'm going to puree it. I'm then going to put it into a smaller pan. I have a smaller pan back here. I don't know if you can see. It doesn't matter. But it's something that I can use that's a little easier for me to handle since I don't have so much, since it's gone down a lot in volume since the tomatoes have collapsed and been cooked. But then I'm going to heat that up, and as I heat it up, I'm going to be able to taste it for seasoning, check my seasoning, and then it's going to be processed in my water bath canner so I can keep it on my pantry shelf. So right now I'm just going to take this, and it's really nothing to see, but I'll just show you a little bit. I'm going to just get this pulp and everything. The seeds are still in there. They're not going to hurt anything. These blenders are fascinating. They can just make puree of anything. I don't have any stems. The stems have been taken off and cores have been taken out. Hard cores. But I do have, some skins from the peppers, some skins from the smaller tomatoes. And this is cold. It's right from my refrigerator, so it's not going to, I don't have to worry about that when I go to blend it. And I'm not going to do the blending on camera because it's just going to be too, it's going to be too noisy. But if you didn't have a blender like this, you could use an immersion blender, those stick blenders, handheld blenders that go in here. Or you can do it in a food processor as well. I could put it through a food mill and get rid of the, get rid of the skins and things, but these little bits of skins are just going to go right in there. Nothing tough. It's going to be fine. Okay, so I'm going to stop the camera and start my blender, and then I'll show you when it's pureed what it looks like. Okay, this is what it looks like when it comes out of the blender. It's beautiful, thick, and rich. It looks thicker than it would be if it were hot. You know, as things heat up, they get a little thinner. I could thin it if I wanted to thin it a little bit. I could thin it with veggie stock or chicken stock if I didn't care about keeping it vegetarian, but I kind of do, because then my whole family could eat it. At serving, if it is, I might want to keep it a little thick too, because when I go to serve it, I might want to add a little bit of cream, make it a creamy soup. It's only vegetables in here now. There's no stock, just the juice from the vegetables. It looks a little orange or brown more than red because it has a high amount of basil in it. Like 4 cups of basil leaves. So the green and the red, and also my tomatoes, I had some green tomatoes, some red tomatoes, some orange tomatoes, yellow tomatoes. So it kind of comes out brown, but it still tastes delicious. So I'm going to move it over onto my stove and heat it up to get it a little, I want to get it hot for canning, but I also want to heat it up a bit so I can taste it, check for seasoning. And then I will heat it up and I will get it into my jars, and we'll see how many jars I get. Before I put the soup in, I'm going to add just a little bit of bottled lemon juice. Yes, I do have a lemon tree, but there seems to be a safety issue with using fresh lemons. They're not always consistent in the level of acidity, I believe. I think I could check it because I have pea strips, but I don't. I just use the bottled lemon juice just to make sure there's enough citric acid in my jar, because I do have things other than the tomatoes to make sure I have a safe level of acidity. It's interesting, I can use fresh limes all the time and safely, but lemons, there seems to be an issue. Anyway, I'm only going to put perhaps a teaspoon or half a teaspoon in the jar. It's very strong. And I'm going to go ahead and ladle the soup into my jar. And I want to go fill it to the top, except I'm going to leave a little bit of a headspace at the top. And I believe I'm going to go to about an inch headspace, which is just at the neck here. And let's see how that works. And let's see. I can always top it off a little more if I need to. I want to review what I have in here. I know you like a recipe that I write down. I don't really use a recipe for things like soup, but I try to maintain a proportion. So we were guessing that I had maybe 14 pounds of assortment of tomatoes from the garden that had been frozen. So this contains all of those tomatoes, minus some of the skins, minus the cores. And then I sauteed, those were cooked down, and I sauteed some onion, some leftover bell pepper. I had a little bit of red, a little bit of orange, a little bit of yellow from a relish tray from Thanksgiving. Also some celery that was left over. I had maybe 4 to 5 cloves of garlic. And then I put in some fresh thyme from the garden, and I put in about 4 cups of fresh basil leaves. So, get that out of the way. and I'm just tasting it for flavor. You know, it just, usually tomato things, I like to roast the tomatoes as much as I can. But in this case, I was trying to save time. I froze them. And it's just a really good trick for people that are in a hurry or don't have enough of a product, or whatever. Whatever. So let's see here. I'm not sure how much I'm going to get. So I'm just going to transfer these jars into my canner, and I'm going to let it return it to a boil. Make sure they're covered by at least 1 inch of water, maybe 2 inches of water over the top, and return to a boil, and then boil it for 10 minutes. Then we'll take the jars out. All right. I also have other things that are rather timely. Basil is I still have basil, but it's really wanting to go to flower so badly. And once it goes to flower, it's kind of not good anymore. It gets a little bitter. So I'm trying to make the most of the basil harvest. So in days coming up, I'm going to be dealing with that. And I'm also going to be trying to propagate new basil plants, which that'll be another video. I'm going to show you about that. But I'm trying to work out all these things, bringing in eggplants, bringing in, I still am getting some zucchini squash. You know, there's, you know, I still have chard and I have kale. But trying to deal with some of these, the things at the same time, dealing with things like Thanksgiving, etc. You know, the things that are happening. Samhain, my tea party, all these things. So I've developed a lot of little tricks of how to do things a little bit at a time, a little bit slower, and slow down my actions to maybe match the changing of the season. The tomatoes can be, like I just said, the tomatoes can be harvested and put in the freezer till later. I made my rolls for Thanksgiving were sweet potatoes out of our sweet potato crop, which we harvested the sweet potatoes about 3 weeks ago, and they've been curing. And then I took some of the very smallest of the sweet potatoes, the runs I like to call them, that are really not good enough they won't last for long-term storage because they're just too small. They will spoil fast. I take those and I cook those down and make a pulp out of those. And then that cooked sweet potato pulp, I make my Thanksgiving rolls out of, for dinner rolls, out of the sweet potato pulp. The sweet potato, but the rolls, you know, to make rolls on Thanksgiving while you're making all the other things is a little tricky too. So I divide that task up into smaller jobs, and I make my dough one day, and that first raw, it goes into an oiled bag and it goes in the refrigerator, and I keep it in there for a day or two until I want to bake them. Then I take them out and I let that dough come to room temperature, shape it for the second rise, and then get it ready for the oven. Those little tricks that we can do to save ourselves time and bother work really well. And those kind of things that I use in my little household tips like that, I also can use in the garden when I'm dealing with my harvest. Okay? And I'm going to show you some of the things that I'm going to be doing in some of the weeks to come, maybe. Okay, be dividing it up and let it happen. When we try to rush, when we try to draw a line down through everything, you know, something starting and something beginning, it causes a lot of stress. It causes a lot of stress because I have to get this done before, I have to get my Halloween decorations away. I have to get my my Thanksgiving decorations away because I have to make room for Yule. I have to make room for Christmas. Well, do you? Do you? You can allow that to happen. The pumpkins are still here. I still have pumpkins on my porch. I still have some pumpkins here that I use for decoration. Some of the pumpkins have been cooked for pulp and frozen. Some of the pumpkins are yet to be cooked, and I will cook that. I will roast them. I will smash up the pulp. and I will put them in the freezer. I use them in the freezer for myself and my husband. We make pies out of them, we make soup out of them, but I also have it in there for my dogs. It's helpful, it's healthy for dogs for different things, good for what ails a dog. If a dog has diarrhea or a dog has constipation, a little bit of pumpkin in their food is very beneficial to them and will help them for some reason. It does both jobs, but just a little bit. So we freeze some of that in little amounts too. And also I have some ornamental pumpkins that I really don't like for cooking. They're not too good. They're a little stringy for my taste. You know, I don't want to even make muffins out of them really. I guess I could, but you know who loves them and who appreciates them are my hens. My hens love them. So we take the pumpkin, we cut it open and throw it in the yard, and they peck away. They'll peck away at it, eat it all until over a period of a couple of days, until nothing left there but the skin on the outside mostly. So we're not going to hurry and try to get rid of one thing before we start the next thing. It's still okay. We're still harvesting. We're still in that time on the wheel where we're moving into something. Recalling that, yes, well, we do get ready for Yule. We start to get ready for Yule now because we have preparations. A lot of us put up a lot of decorations, or we make gifts for others, you know, or we purchase gifts for others, and we have all those preparations. But Yule does not come until, the 21st of December. Okay, so we're still a good month away. Still a good month away. And then it's going to stay Yule. It's going to stay Yule. We're welcoming that light at Yule. We're going to stay. It's going to have Yule. We're going to have Christmas if we celebrate. Hanukkah, whenever Hanukkah comes this year, I'm not sure. But the returning of the light is important to so many of us for so many different reasons. And with the new year, the calendar new year, so which is New Year as well, Halloween, Samhain. Don't be in a rush. Don't try to run around the wheel, or as I used to say in the past, hop. We're not hopping from Samhain to Yule to Imbolc to Ostara to May. We don't hop. We We walk, and it's a gradual walk. It's a gradual walk which we enjoy the view along the way. Okay, I'm going to add a little bit in here. I hope I add a little bit to in here somewhere. I don't know how I'm going to edit this. I'm trying to edit this. I'm not even sure what I'm doing today, but I'm going to be dealing right now, today and tomorrow. I'm dealing with tomatoes. I'm dealing with basil. And then I'm on to some chilies. I've got some chilies that I've got to deal with too. So I've got lots of work to do, but I'm not going to try to do it on one day. I'm going to do it, break up little jobs here and there. So my editing is going to take a little bit of skill on my part to try to edit it so that it will make sense. But I hope you enjoy. I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you take a little bit of time to take smaller steps, slow down, do little tricks that you need to do to break up some of your chores into smaller chores. Be kind to yourself, but really enjoy the season for what it is. Yes, you can get ready for one season while still enjoying the benefits of the season that you're in. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Rebecca, the Good Wife, and I wish you blessings.